Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Ilea, also known as Green Eye Trombonist, and today we are going to do this awesome Let's Talk interview with my friend Maureen Mauk, which also I should ask if I pronounce that the right way. I'll have you introduce yourself in a little bit so we can make sure that's right. Before we get started on the interview though, I want to remind everyone that we are still raising money for the ACLU. Donations can come in through today. You'll be able to get all the rewards in our donate tiers, including at this point, any donation you do, the next time I stream Pokemon Shield, your name will be given to a Pokemon. And that is at any donation level. So go ahead and donate. Because this is an interview, notifications have been disabled during this stream, but anything that does come in, I will replay the next time that I stream. All right. Make sure I didn't miss anything of that. Don't believe so. So just give some background about why I've been doing this interview series. With the COVID pandemic taking over, academic conferences have by and large been canceled, as they should, but that takes away a space for graduate students to talk about their research, really takes away an opportunity for grad students to be more involved in the community. But at the same time, I've always believed that research and the academia should be accessible to the public. So all of that kind of went together and went into doing this interview series where I invite different grad students on who are doing some really awesome work out there to talk about their research, grad school in general, things that they want to talk about, and have a chance for you, the chat, to ask any questions that you might have. So today we're going to be interviewing Maureen. And Maureen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Maureen Mauk, and I am going into my fourth year, I don't know. I'm a third year PhD student at University of Wisconsin-Madison, studying communication arts, specifically media and cultural studies. And yes, so this is my world right now. I'm a PhD student, and it's lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me, Alia.
Of course, yeah. I've been seeing some of the stuff that you've been interviewed for some of the stuff that you have recently had published, some of the stuff that you're going to have published, and we've been able to talk about some of like your research interests and stuff before. So definitely wanted to make sure that you were able to come on. It's awesome that we were able to get this time. So you do say that you're a grad student now. What kind of brought you into your field, grad school, all of that jazz? Like, what brought you here?
Absolutely. I have a very meandering path to PhD student world that honestly I didn't realize was that irregular or that like abnormal. Considering I always looked at professors as being, really worldly and have like worked for thousands of years into before they become this person of higher knowledge. So I, still feel very small and like I have a lot of learning to do. But I basically go to college like every 10 years. So like I went to Cornell for my undergrad. There I graduated in 2001, studied communication there. But there was kind of a communication science approach, and it was within the School of Agriculture and Life Sciences. And I also played Division I field hockey there. It was just a fantastic experience, and it set me up to do really solid like public relations. So I worked in PR both in Boston at a high tech PR firm, and then opened with the same company in San Francisco. Then eventually, I actually went to Honolulu, Hawaii, worked in PR there, spent a lot of time just being in the ocean and enjoying that, and then decided, okay, like let's go back to the mainland, let's do this. I went back to Boston, worked at a publications company, so another whole side of communication with that kind of world. Decided I really, in my heart, always wanted to work in television. I knew, and TV is one of those things like you got to know somebody, or you can go to grad school for it. So I went to Boston University and did a full year there studying television production within the communication school. And then spent another semester technically studying abroad through the BU School of Communication in LA, because LA is so scary, it's like going to a new world. And it was fantastic. So that led me to moving to LA, where I really didn't have any contacts. But the intern, for anybody that's interested in working in film or TV, like physically in that world, interning is the way to go. And so those internships really kind of like helped me get that foothold into other jobs within that career sector. So I worked in LA for I think, gosh, 12 years, 10 years at least, in TV, and then eventually specifically standards and practices. So my first job out there, I was an intern, both on the set of Malcolm in the Middle and Scrubs. So on Malcolm in the Middle, I worked within the writer's room, and Scrubs, I worked in post-production, which was fantastic because I really love the writing side of TV and production, and I absolutely love editing and just the post-production side of things to make it happen. And like I got to like help Zach Braff pick out music for like him. It was a great combination. And so both were great opportunities, and everything in LA comes from being a good worker and being kind to people and working your way up. So, you know, I went from picking up cigarette butts in the parking lot and delivering dailies to working my way, you know, into great realms of actually getting paid for my services. Then I worked on Brothers and Sisters, and then I worked in post-production on The Office. Eventually became the assistant to the head of the SVP of production for 20th Century Fox Television Studios. Did my time with him. He was this fantastic executive named Bruce Margolis. There we were in charge of all the drama productions and like the physical production and the budgets of 24 Shark, Prison Break. Gosh, there was lots of other shows happening, you know, coming and going, Journeyman, Fringe. And then moved from there. I didn't want to be an assistant forever. And I kind of worked and found an opportunity to do standards and practices. Have you ever heard of standards and practices?
I am not super familiar. Like, I always feel like Hollywood and television and film and everything is this black wall between it and regular, like, society, and don't understand how you get in there other than now, like, the internships or knowing a guy, right?
I mean, that's a lot of it. It's so much like that first internship, they remember me. And actually, and another any advice to any intern is, if you're like interested in working there beyond your internship, be sure to bring that up to the people you're working for after you're doing a good job there for a while. Like I mentioned at Malcolm, like, oh yeah, I'm not going back to Boston. I'm here. I'm in LA. Like, I went to work. And they're like, you're kidding me. Like, we are hiring for a PA right now. And I was like, yeah, what? You put me on that list. And so like they technically interviewed me, but I basically already had the job. But they assumed that I was going back to college. So that was a huge like moment that nobody told me. Like, be sure you do a good job for a while. Don't come in and say, yeah, I want to stay here. But then after you've kind of earned your keep for a couple months, be sure to point, you know, be clear about your career goals and what you want. And I think that's another thing. I do help a lot of people, students, both at UW and just through friends that reach out and say, hey, so-and-so just graduated and they're just interested in moving to LA or, you know, wherever, New York, Atlanta. Can you help them find a job? But I think the first piece of advice is always like, give the people you're talking to a little bit of direction. Like, hey, are you interested? Are you a tech person? Are you interested in visual production? Are you going to direct? Are you interested in the writing creative side? Are you into animation? Are you into scripted, unscripted? Because there's so many different avenues, and by no means are you married to one. But I think that having, like, I can't help you if you just say, I don't know, it just seems like a really cool field. But if you say, hey, I know I'm not going to be there tomorrow, but I really love kind of the visual aspect and see myself holding a camera someday. Okay, like now let me like get the ball rolling and talk to some people that we know that work in,
Mm-hmm.
who are DPs or directors of photography or who are doing that kind of world. So that's like one piece of advice that I think it took me a little bit to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I got into standards and practices because I was doing a lot of stuff with post-production and like on the set in the field production. Originally, I thought I wanted to do like line production, kind of the boss who's in charge of the money. And I was seeing more and more for that I didn't. So my husband's a producer and director too, and he's been doing this for 20 years. And he was a biology major. So like anybody can do anything. Believe in it and learn along the way. But I realized I didn't want to be working like a 16-hour day on set every day. Like I also needed job stability.
Mm-hmm.
And the productions come and go, and you go on hiatus and you go on unemployment. Like it's just a world that I wasn't super psyched about. But I loved being on set, and I loved the camaraderie, and I loved the creative production side. So I was a funny fit for it, but I heard about standards and practices, which was, for me, I worked at Fox Network first, and this is not Fox News, separate company. Let me be very clear.
Small caveat there.
Same large ownership, but this would be Fox Broadcasting, who puts on, or the layman viewer, what you're seeing on television from 7 or 7 Central till 10 p.m. Around the clock every night. So that would be shows like American Idol and Simpsons and X Factor, MasterChef, those types of things. So I moved over the same lot, same parking garage, but from studio to network, and worked my way up as a standards and practices executive, which is the people who are essentially the censors for the network. So I review every script, every gameplay idea, every competitive reality show, every question on every quiz show, every contestant and their history and their psychological evaluations, every storyboard for animation, every joke for a Miss Universe competition that's going to be on somebody's note card, and make sure it's okay for broadcast. Mm-hmm. And so with it, like half the department kind of came from a TV production side, and half the department came from like a law side. So I definitely knew the law through and through, but was not a lawyer. Mm-hmm. It was fun, but it was tough because your butt's on the line. Like you can't make mistakes.
What had you
I haven't even gotten into why I'm in academia.
Right? And that's what I'm asking here is like, so you didn't want to be on set doing the kind of LA hustle, as I've heard it called. You wanted a little bit more stability. You got into standards and practices. What then had you transition from standards and practices to wanting to go back to school?
So thank you for bringing me back onto track, Olivia. So I did. It was fantastic. I finally had an opportunity actually to work for a different, like a toy company doing standards and practices for children's content and children's television commercials, and YouTube videos, like all the things that happen to push a major like company into a children's realm. And that, I think, inspired and helped me pivot to realize I needed to do some deeper thinking about how media was affecting our world and our society. And I would ask these big questions like, yes, okay, sure. Okay, yeah, we're making this video for YouTube, but like YouTube's not for kids. You have to be 13 and up to technically use it. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking ethically on a lot of things, and not to say the company that and the people I work for were unethical, but it was the business and the capitalist side of selling media, and especially once you start bringing children involved, and at the same time I was having my own children, it hit home for me, and I was just really inspired to do something bigger and different. And I kept coming back to this idea of teaching, becoming a professor. I think I always knew I would. I always knew I'd work in TV, and I feel like I always knew I would eventually work in academia in some way or shape or form. My mom reminded me that when I finally saved up all my like birthday money as a kid, the first thing I wanted was a Barbie television set. So I had a Barbie TV studio.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, that's my world. I kind of did it very like quietly. I took my GREs on a sick day, and I studied at 5 o'clock in the morning before I went to work to learn the math for the GRE. Got myself into a couple grad student programs, did a lot of interviewing to figure out where I belonged and where would be a good fit for us to do a huge move from LA to somewhere else. And in my head, I was thinking it's just like 2 years, and then but I've been here for 3, I've been here for a few more, but we love it. And so what I'm doing is I'm studying I've taken a couple interesting, fun paths of what my research consists, but one of the main things is looking at how parents are affected by the kind of digital media landscape, and how. So I'm not really studying like kids and how like the media effects on kids. That's almost like the byproduct, and there's fantastic scholars that do that. So I'm really looking at how like the both technology and the business side and the regulatory side all land into parents' laps. And I do a lot of other stuff too, but which I'd be happy to talk about. But like there's a very critical and feminist approach to my research to think from a different perspective about what I see and hear every day is like parents and particularly mothers carrying a lot of guilt for how their children consume media, and just the onslaught of what they're trying to navigate without a lot of time or opportunity to learn or to set guardrails. So that's what I'm looking at.
Okay, yeah. So would you say then that your time with the toy company that happened to coincide right when you were becoming a parent yourself is what got you interested in that kind of research?
I think to some extent, yeah. I don't think that you could. I don't think I was as clued into kids content until you have kids, until you start thinking in that way. Doesn't mean a person can't, but for sure it was a lot of things. And I also at the same time, I was looking for, I mean, just to be like completely honest, I was looking for a change. Like just what are we doing? And we, at the same time, where I was living in LA, we lived in Torrance, California, in a near the beach, but also near a gigantic ExxonMobil oil refinery that
Oh, wow.
exploded. It rained ash down on our town, and me and another mom got together that I just met through like a Facebook parenting site, and formed like a 2,000 women strong alliance of just the very grassroots activism to change air quality laws in our town, but actually for the state of California. So we're known as FLARE, Families Lobbying Against Refinery Exposures. And since then, and we're still working on it, but like have 3 different laws written into California state law by our representative Al Murasucci. We got him elected. Honestly, we did a lot of work to get some new representation, and then we're able to win like a $2.5 million grant. It was actually like the penalty money for the refinery for their explosion, and with that have since had used partnered with a company called Sonoma Technology to put air quality monitors all around the refinery in real time. Sorry, going such a, but real time alerts so that,
Yeah.
I would put my kid to bed and wonder like, are they going to start flaring and like dropping ash down in our neighborhood again overnight? And it was usually done overnight. And you would wake up to the smell of like a burnt vacuum cleaner.
Wow.
So that still happens in that town. And there was a lot of like, where are we going to move? What are we going to do? And that's, I was like, well, you know what? Like, we don't have to stay here. I could become a professor. So there was that too. Like there was this combination of like, I can see how my work is affecting families and children. And I can see that I have all this interesting talent and I don't really want to work for a major corporation anymore. And at the same time, I also, and one of the other things that I really want to do more studying is how are women using social media for social and environmental change. There's another whole paper that I'm sitting on to do work with on that. There's a lot of opportunity to kind of research like what's working and what doesn't. And we got a lot of flack like, oh, do you think your minivans run on dirty diapers, moms? Like blah blah blah. Like so, but we're able to take our kids down to town hall and do some major political and environmental change in that town, and it's still happening. And Catherine, who who is really at the helm, 100% at the helm at this point, is still living there. But honestly, I wasn't comfortable living in that town anymore.
So there are so many routes because you've had so much going on in your life, and you have made sure to kind of be active in your life and going towards goals that we could talk about. We don't have time to talk about right now. We could probably end up being here forever, but I don't think that that's realistic.
Yes, thank you. Keep in mind.
But so one of the things that you've talked about is your interest in like thinking through ethical implications, and you have been an activist. You think about things from a parental perspective. So I'm interested in how you have developed research questions, because, you know, a lot of times in academia there is this like stereotype of an armchair academic, right? The person who studies in the chair doesn't, they write papers, get things published, but what they are doing doesn't really have an impact on the world. So how do you go about writing and creating research questions that do align with this desire you have to have an impact, and a hopefully good impact on society?
That's a great question. And that's the point of it all, right? Like if we're here doing research to, you know, why would we not? Like what's the point of writing or publishing a paper that exists in a bubble that maybe a few other scholars might read and maybe might get you, you know, tenured or the next promotion if it's not helping people? Like I'm baffled by that across any industry or any, honestly, like any business at this point. Is we are living in a world that needs a lot of help. And so how can you use your skill set and your knowledge and your energy, and while you're doing it, like do something that you like, you know, and everybody's got, you know, me and you, we have fantastically different interests. And you know, like, but it's like use what you know, but we both love Harry Potter, but like use what you know to do something good for the world, right? And I think I've actually been really impressed with a lot of the scholars that I've come across especially within UW-Madison and within like one of our special organizations, the Society of Cinema and Media Studies. There's a lot of activism happening. There's a lot of work going through. So I haven't beared witness to a lot of armchair scholarly work myself. And I realized that like I found the right program, because I do think that there's a lot that everybody sees that can be done. And and we're communicators. So we're all in a position where, you know, we're in, like, I think a lot of scholarship, if you're dealing with, let's just go, you know, a medical science, even somebody's studying COVID right now, a great scientist does not necessarily make a great writer or you know, or oral communicator to get the word out there. And that was actually one of the things I studied even as an undergrad. We were studying how can we teach, you know, rural places or, you know, countries how to better grow their crops, you know, with the science, but how do we actually teach them in a way that makes sense to the audience? So I think it's taking that same perspective and saying, okay, what is it that I'm interested in? What is happening in the world right now? So being like acutely aware of your positionality, but what is happening in a much larger circle? Where are the needs? Where are the hot spots? Like, you know, things keep changing, and where, you know, and what the media has a tolerance for as far as covering and becoming more, you know, taking your pro-social work, but actually taking it to a place that might actually receive some media attention. And sometimes those just happen to time out. I think, like, you know, we didn't know the Me Too movement was going to hit like right when I started doing a big paper about feminism. But like sometimes these things work in a like organic and fantastic way. But I think most importantly, it's asking good questions, but that relate to larger issues. Because if we're not mean, you agree with this, I'm sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if we're doing research that just satisfies our own personal like need, like I love that. Like I'll like dork out to anything that's like super fun for me. But if the ripple effect doesn't bring new information to light that could potentially help others down the road, like I just don't get it. And I think when I first started here, I would say I was hit by that a few times. I was like, okay, cool, that's so neat that you're studying this about Hollywood. Like, have you shown this to anybody at the studios? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, like Dana Wallen would love to read this, but like that I think we as scholars need to break through that to get our research out there to a more public medium. And I think like there are ways to do that. And actually I think we should all have more PR training to figure out how to bring that to a good friend. But actually I can tell you more about like specific success with one of my papers about a famous TV star named Faye Emerson. But all of the things that have like rippled out from my research into the public world on that, I had nothing to do with. Like it just happened. And I was thinking about that because I was like, I bet you everybody's thinking I'm using all my Hollywood connections to get this out there. But what happened was that I think I asked a really good question at the right time, and then found really good, solid new material to work with.
So if you are comfortable with it, I'm going to drop that deadline article in chat.
Yeah, please.
Because it's an awesome article where you're talking about Faye Emerson. We can get into that whole piece at another time probably, but yeah, so you said that this one happened to be like circumstances lined up where you asked a really great question and that helped get the work that you were doing out there. What advice, because yes, I completely agree with you. My master's is in applied anthropology, so I'm very much towards the mindset of the work you do should do something, right?
So great.
So how do you form connections so that it's not always going to line up perfectly, right? How do you form connections so that you can get your work in front of eyes to whom it will matter?
Such a good question. I think I would say my actually first piece of advice is be really kind to those closest to you and it. So like two of my papers and my dissertations heavily involved with archives. And so getting to know the archivists here within the Wisconsin Historical Society has been so important to my work. And that has advanced a lot of the knowledge because they are experts in the field who are doing this and get paid to do this. So because I did the work on Faye Emerson, Mary Husbeck updated Faye Emerson's IMDb account, which led people to some of my research, and that led CNN towards finding it when they were doing a upcoming documentary on the history of late night television. So first of all, like, don't be afraid to ask for help and tell everybody what you're working on, because I constantly, the more I know about what other people's research is, within your grad student community, when I see something like, oh, I know so-and-so's working on this, like, oh, here, let me send you this article. And you just have all these other people with other tentacles that are also consuming media and like doing actual research and in archives that once in a while like hit on a gem for you. So I think start with that. And then, once your paper is written, if as a grad student, we're writing seminar papers, knocking out 1 or 2 a semester usually, is, we can't turn them all over towards publication immediately. But I think with time and then like effort to go back, and is just new perspective, as even 6 months or a year go by, things change, and you look at this piece that you put a lot of time and research in, you can revisit some of these to then bring them to light a little bit more. So like one thing I think about is, because of that, as time changes, then you realize, oh, I hit on something here, and now it's really relevant to what's happening in the news. And I think that's a good way to do that. There's other, I mean, this is a very small thing, but one of my mentors told me about, there's an organization called She Source, SHESOURCE. And you can sign yourself up as an expert, so that it's to bring more female experts and scholars and scientists into the quotable media, so that if a journalist is looking for an expert on anthropology, they could find your information and reach out to you and interview you about it. So I think that's a great thing to share with others, to like, and I have shared it with a few friends already. Hey, you need to make a profile and put yourself out there, so that if somebody's researching this, join a lot of organizations, join a lot of groups of activists. I'm part of the Gina Davis Foundation, who's all about gender representation. There's a lot of great new ones coming in about race and media representation. Like just becoming, within a lot of our conferences, I think there's special interest groups, and find those mentors. I think that's the biggest thing that has helped me, just like internships did as getting my master's, and then getting into the LA world, is finding those mentors. And my mentors in LA were my bosses that I used to work with. My mentors now as a PhD student, trying to get more publications, but also my research out there, and just survive, are professors. And and finding those that will be in your corner, and that will really like fight for you, and think that you're on their mind, like become their bud, like, and in an organic way. Like, I'm not saying don't force anything, but find those that like are working for you, and even that you don't know that well. Like one of my favorite professors that I'm working with here, and she's on my dissertation committee, is Dr. Rebecca Willett, and she's through the School of Information. I was introduced to her through another professor here within my department. Said, you guys are working on some of similar stuff, and I asked if I could do an independent study with her. So I'd spent a summer doing an independent study, which turned into a research project, which turned into a much bigger research project with another professor. I wrote my seminar paper using the research, and we just got published in Learning, Media, and Technology. And it's research doing discourse analysis about how girls are implicated in like coding. So the idea, like, teach your kid to code, and coding and teaching your kid HTML, and signing them up for camps and lessons to do that has become like this like no-brainer of importance. And we really sort of like take apart the discourse that you see in public facing media about how it's actually putting a lot of pressure again on parents, and taking away the real problem, like when we're saying pipeline problems of hiring women in technology. They're not by doing this and saying, well, we just need more girls taking coding lessons and then it'll be fine in 20 years. It's not addressing like the systemic issues happening within technology field and STEM fields, and more largely.
Yeah.
So had I not reached out to that professor, Dr. Willett, to just kind of get to know her and like see if we had any shared research interests, none of this would have happened.
Wow. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to read that article yet. Our library hasn't updated with it yet.
This came out, don't you worry.
Yeah, I know. I was like, but I want to find it. I was looking through the library and I was like, no, give me access. But just reading the abstract from that was fascinating. And it makes total sense that we look at these like girls code and creating more coding camps for girls as, yes, this is great work. And it can be great work, but it shouldn't be the only work, right? It's not the solution.
Correct, yeah. And there's nothing wrong with teaching a girl to code or any child to code. Yeah. But is it the most important thing, and does it like solve the future problems of technology? No. Like, and that the coding that we're learning is kind of the bricklaying that is great, but what we really need is to be teaching all children just leadership and communication skills, and also how to point out, the major problems that are happening in our country and call it out at some point.
Man, yeah, there's so many things that I could ask today. I may ask you to come back at some point so that we can do kind of more deep dives. You've done this piece on Faye Emerson, you've done this piece on girls coding, but your dissertation topic is different, right?
Yeah, I'm getting into kind of my roots and looking at it's different, but it's all connected. Like there's um, definitely using a lot of the same kind of research and resources and framework along the way, but taking a historiography approach, looking at old archives in particular. And so lucky University of Wisconsin-Madison has some incredible archives from the early days of television in particular. So looking at the history of television standards and practices and how, so really what I wanted to do was look at parental controls in the digital space. So I'm thinking when you create a profile on Disney Plus or Netflix or Hulu, what does it ask you to do? Does it want you to say how old you are, what profile picture, and how does it then start to create this world that you live in within that platform? And particularly for parents, there's some age gating things. You can say, yeah, like my nothing over TV Y7, which is basically they're putting little V-chip ratings on old, which are kind of antiquated, and they're just doing it themselves, which was not the way V-chips were supposedly set up. So I wanted to study that, but what I realized is no one has actually done like a really good deep dive and critical look at some of like the hot spots of how standards and practices came to be, V-chip ratings in particular. There's definitely been some great, fantastic research on the history of how like the Telecommunications Act of 1996 created and implemented V-chip ratings, which are those little ratings bugs you see when you turn on, if you turn on Glee and it says like TV 14 DLV, like D stands for dialogue, which is kind of usually sexual innuendo dialogue, L for language, B for violence, S is for like sexual situations. Some parents don't even know what those stand for. And why should we? Like it's not like you get like a training manual when you get a kid. And like they say, oh, and these are the things you're gonna need to know in 13 years. By the way, good luck watching Glee. Like there's a process, and we learn because you hear other parents talk about it, or maybe there's screen time guidelines by the Academy of Pediatrics. So anyways, I'm examining what's happening now on parental controls by taking a look back as to how it came to be. And so, for instance, those V-chip ratings are not mandated to happen on Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus. There's nobody the government is not forcing them to do it, yet they do it. And that alone is quite interesting. But they do it their own way, and there's different reasons and different like divisions and departments that do it. At one point, from what I could tell, Netflix had a combination of kids content taggers meets kind of like their marketing people assigning the V-chip rating. And Fuller House, for example, ever seen Fuller House?
Yeah, I ended up watching all of season 1. That was a binge.
So yeah, like I did too. And I loved Full House, the original. And Full House, the original was pretty gentle. Like, there was a little bit of like, Lord have mercy, or whatever Uncle Jesse was saying. But it was pretty tame. And so what was interesting with Fuller House when it came out on Netflix is they definitely, used all that great nostalgia and were targeting a much, I think, older audience, including the original viewers, but also at the same time trying to garner in the younger viewers. So they rated it TVY. So like TV to begin with. So it's TVY, which is the other things that were rated TVY were Little Baby Bumpkin and a couple like Dr. Seuss shows, and then Fuller House. And even in the first 3 episodes, like they talked about getting drunk on wine. There was a whole like innuendo thing about Uncle Jesse getting a vasectomy and all semen had left the boat. There was just they were talking about acid. Like there's really heavy stuff that would certainly not qualify for that, but there's absolutely nobody mandating that. So that's just an example of, even if a parent actually does try to set up some guardrails, what does that mean when companies are slapping on any rating that they care to? That eventually did change. There was a little bit of pushback But it's hard to monitor and know, who and why is making those changes
Yeah.
in our black box society.
And I do imagine that some of it might also relate to the whole YouTube Peppa Pig kind of scandal that happened that made YouTube change its children's content, basically.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube is a completely different ball game, and certainly works because it's user generated content, works under a lot of different like web and entanglement than kind of that traditional TV
Mm-hmm.
feed would. But absolutely, there still is a kind of a commotion about what are we doing, who's monitoring. It used to be who's monitoring the airways, now who's monitoring our computers,
Mm-hmm.
where do parents fall in, like, is it all on the parents to do this, or should YouTube be doing more? And then in the same ways, can our other like digital platforms like Netflix do more? And what's different is people pay for Netflix and HBO and YouTube. Like, it's not a free airwave,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a free YouTube. Where you're a subscriber, so like I think we forget about like the power that we actually carry as a customer.
Wow. Yeah. Um, that is all awesome information. I know I don't have you for very much longer, so I do want to ask if there's anything that we didn't talk about today that you really want to talk about during this interview, and not when I hound you for a future interview.
No, I mean, thank you for all these great questions. I think, I think the things that I really wanted to make sure I hit on today were, you know, grad school is for everybody. It's never too late to go back. There's so much to learn. I'm sad that I'm done with my coursework. I would stay forever and learn just for
Yeah.
there's so.
I had a panic attack when I realized, like, I turned in my final papers for the spring and then realized I only have one more year of coursework. So I understand that.
So I think, first of all, on that side of things, if we're just talking about, just be, if there's grad students listening, I'm always happy to talk about, and please feel free to reach out about the balance of being a student, being a parent, as a student. Like, there's that whole other fun can of worms, which has been excellent. And I think for all grad students, I think the biggest thing is to get outside of just the halls of academia. Like, you need to have your own life. Like, I remember, like, one, I don't even know who it was, but I wrote somebody like, "Hey, do you have any advice as I go into my PhD program?" They said, "You should get a hobby." I was like, "Oh my God." Like, he's like, "I found fishing was like really a great release for not thinking about my schoolwork." And like, I mean, like, yes, you please make sure you get one hobby. Everybody should have at least one hobby. But I think, like, you should be doing life. Like, don't put like life on hold because you're a student. And despite, like, we're not bringing in like quite a livable income, I understand that. Like, but there's a lot that can be done, and you should be living your life while you're doing this. So I'm like heavily involved in the community, and I think especially through having children and doing soccer and public schools and preschools and all the things, and the community gardens. Like, get involved with your community, live here. Like, I was a military brat, and I'm sure this was like somebody like trademarked this, but like they would always tell like all the military spouses, "Bloom where you're planted." um you know but I say it to myself a lot, like, you gotta like live, like, you don't say, "Well, I'm only here for 3 years or 5 years." This is where you live, and like, take ownership in your time and your space here, and have fun with it, and plant a garden. Like, do the things, and get to know your community and your members, because it's part of your life. And that, like, then feeds into, as right now, as I know, because I have kids in elementary school and we're in a pandemic, some of my research is looking into, like, how are local schools here using, what digital platforms are they using for education,
Mm-hmm.
and where does the children's privacy go? How is Seesaw and Google Hangouts, and Google Classroom, what are they doing with all the videos that my kids made this past 3 months? So there's a lot of other, it opens up more questions, and just being a person that's talking to other people, at a park, you start to realize like all the other things that the rest of your world is facing. So please, like, open yourself up to the community. Think about how your research can help others. And I think if it's really good research, there's a way that you can get that out there. But get it, take the time, take the summer to rewrite, get those publications out there. Don't be afraid. I mean, I've entered, like, my Faye Emerson article started as a historiography paper. We had to go to the archives and write a paper. Basically how it began. And I started with the question looking at late night television and how Jimmy Kimmel was getting accosted for speaking out on healthcare. And I was like, surely there's been other late night TV hosts that spoke out on politics. And it just kept going back and back until I found Faye Emerson, and come to find that she actually was the first late night TV talk show host. Little did anybody know or give her credit for. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a really nice and easy way. And as far as if we're talking about media and parents, I keep kind of like ticking on the guilt and the pandemic in general. Is to parents, I would advise to take the pressure off. Like, it's going to be okay. We live in a technology saturated world. It's okay that your children are watching TV. My children are watching TV right now, so I can talk to you. They're going to be fine. Keep in mind, we're in unprecedented times, but like, children and how they interact with media will always be, it's always going to be part of their world. And by no means do you feel like you have to, you alone are in charge of being in charge of your kids' media consumption. You absolutely need to help guide them and talk them through it, but they will be okay. Does that help?
Wow. Yeah, I think that's great. I think a few takeaways I have for grad students was be an octopus. We should all be octopi with all of our tentacles, but not necessarily just doing it for the networking, to actually be genuine in what you're putting forth. And I know that's something that I've appreciated from you. When I first started here, you were extremely friendly. You gave your phone number in case like we needed anything, needed to reach out. And I know that's something I appreciated from you then. And that take opportunities, because you don't know where they might lead. That these are kind of the big things that we should take away. And that get a hobby. Mine happens to be playing tabletop role-playing games on the internet, but that don't lock yourself up in the academic ivory tower. That's how you get armchair academics. Actually make sure that you're involved in your community, whatever that community might be, so that what you're doing can contribute back, and so what people are actually interested and what's going on in the world, right?
You said it so much more eloquently than I did.
Well, I'm here just to wrap up your words with pretty bows.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much, Maureen, for this interview. If people have questions that they want to ask you, if they want to keep their finger on the pulse and follow your research, where should they get in contact with you? Where should they look for you?
Well, you can look for me through the UW-Madison website, and also I'm on Twitter at Mo Aloha Mauk. Mo Aloha Mauk. Maureen Sullivan Mauk. So you can find me there. I'm also on LinkedIn. I think I'm not sure. I feel like
I put the command in chat, so anyone on LinkedIn will be able to follow that link and follow you there.
Thank you again. This was fun.
Yeah, this was awesome. Hopefully we will be able to do it again in the future. Hopefully we won't only just meet through the internet. At some point it'll be safe enough for us to talk more, because, man, just the brief mentions of your life and your research interests and everything spark so many questions in my head. I can't ask them right now. We've got stuff to do. But in the future, for sure. So as a reminder for everyone, this will go up on YouTube probably within a couple of days, depending on how tired I get and how much thesis work I get done. So thank you so much, Maureen, once again. Hopefully everyone goes and follows you and reads that Deadline article about your Faye Emerson work because it's awesome.
Yay, thank you.
So thank you everyone for participating in chat. We will continue that ACLU fundraiser through midnight tonight, and then whatever we've raised will be donated to the ACLU. That's the American Civil Liberties Union. So make sure that you get all your donations in now. You'll be able to get your rewards when I next stream. Our next interview will be in 2 weeks from today, and that's going to be a really cool interview with someone who has really been involved with the digital sphere and influencers and performance. So make sure that you tune in for that one. I'll give more details about time and everything as we get closer. And just depending on how my meeting with my advisor goes about my thesis this week, maybe I'll stream on Sunday. So that one's still up in the air. Follow my Twitter at GreenITBone if you want to make sure that you know if I'll be streaming on Sunday. And if not, remember I will be streaming Saturday on twitch.tv/Zelda Universe TV for our bi-weekly show, Realms of the Wild. So that's everything from me. Thank you all for being wonderful, and I will see you next time.